Fighting is like the stock market.
So UFC 313 just happened. Contenders emerged, a new champ was crowned, and even a 29-year-old prospect just retired. So much to get into, but let's get into the stock report. Let's see who's up, who's down, and whose time is finally over. Up first, we had Ozzy Diaz versus Jordan Dos Santos. Santos was 1-0 in the UFC, coming off the Contender Series. Lost a decision to Ozzy Diaz, who was 0-2. Between that, he had won 2 fights by knockout. Both these guys belong in the stay column. The fight was a back and forth. Santos came out really strong in the beginning. At the end of the first round, he was landing consistently. He had really good, varied offense with his boxing, going to the body and the head, but he needs to work on his wrestling. He has potential, which is why I'm not putting him in the down, especially just coming off the Contenders. But the pressure's on in his next fight. Diaz, he was definitely fighting for his job, but he turned it on midway through the second and stole the rest of the fight. If he wants to make it to the top, he really needs defense. He was way too hittable and willing to brawl it out, and he really needed Santos slowing down. Both of them, it'll be interesting to see what happens in their next fight, but for now, solid back and forth. Neither should lose or gain too much stock from it, though. Up next, we had Marion Santos facing Francis Marshall. Francis was 1-3 going in. He really was fighting for his job here. Meanwhile, Santos was 3-0, while 2 of his wins were on tough. Technically, they don't count on his record, but we're counting them. Francis is down, if not cut. The reason I'm not putting him there is he had solid speed in the first round. He performed pretty well, but he needs boxing variety. It was all head hunting, and he had solid timing with his takedowns and work on becoming more dangerous. The problem with Santos was so calm, he was able to just methodically get up because Francis was not threatening him, not with much ground and pound, no submissions. He really was just holding on, which allowed his opponent to get up. Meanwhile, Santos, he's going in the up category. He performed really well. Solid calmness under pressure. He adjusted really well after the first round. He's up due to the win, but he shouldn't be rushed too fast. He's still really young and has really good upside potential if his career is handled properly. Next, we go into Carlos Leal versus Alex Morono. Morono was 0-2 going in, while Carlos was 0-1, but a solid veteran from PFL and Bellator. RIP Bellator. Going straight in. It was the first finish of the night, but Morono is in the cut category. It's an entertaining fighting style, but no defense. He's not really going anywhere in the rankings except maybe to beat some prospects or declining veterans. But now he's on a 3-fight losing streak, and it's getting worse. He was a minus 750 underdog for a reason. This really was just to get Carlos a win. Meanwhile, Carlos, when you're such a big favorite, winning in the first round is kind of expected. He took too many hits. Meanwhile, Carlos put him in the stay category. He's now 1-1, and when you're a minus 750 favorite, that kind of performance is expected. He's in a good spot getting a win over a fringe name, but he's way too hittable. He relies way too much on his head movement, and someone with actual power or crisp striking definitely can exploit that. So he needs to work on his defensive capabilities before taking a real jump up in competition. Next up, we had Bruno Ferreira versus Armen Petrosyan. Bruno was 2-1 going into it and lost his last fight. Meanwhile, Armen was 0-2, getting finished in both, but got finished by solid competition. For those who don't know, he was the guy on the receiving end of Shara Bullett's double spinning back fist. It was a solid back and forth. Armen performed well, and Bruno put on a performance, though he slowed down towards the later stages. Having said that, Armen in the cut category, he's now 0-3 in his last 3, getting finished in all of them. Despite some positives as Bruno started to slow down using his range, he really got dominated, and he pulled out the deliberate cheap moves, faking a nut shot, fence grabs. It's time. He's in the cut category. Meanwhile, Bruno, he can move up. He has good power, solid explosiveness. He needs to work on dealing with longer opponents because the range was definitely a problem. He had trouble closing it when it wasn't a powerful explosion, which caused him to slow down. But despite those issues, he was landing. He was able to close the distance, and the transition on the ground, despite the fence grabs by his opponent, was a solid adjustment, finishing it with a brutal armbar. So definitely ready for him to move up. He just needs to work on his cardio. Up next, the main event of the prelims, Joshua Van versus Ray Trujillo. I really hope that's how you pronounce it. Van was 3-0 going in. Ray was 2-0, not including his road to UFC wins, both solid prospects in their early 20s. Ray was 2-0, not including his wins on the road to UFC show, with much better records behind that. It was a solid back and forth, with Van being the stalking striker and Ray being the grappler, trying a lot of creative takedowns. Having said all that, Ray goes in the down category. Considering his youth and inexperience, it shouldn't be that big of a drop, but he definitely needs to work on his striking and control with his wrestling. When he was able to land the takedowns, he really didn't threaten much, which allowed Van to methodically get up as well as stuff them. It became formulaic, especially as Ray was slowing down. Meanwhile, Van, young and impressive, he's ready for a step up. He had a good variety of attacks, especially against somebody looking to grapple, which can definitely stifle a fighter's offense. He didn't do as much damage as he probably could have, but when you're facing somebody whose sole game plan is to take you down, that can happen. But he was able to get up methodically from some bad positions that even experienced fighters would have struggled with. For those reasons, he's ready to move up. I wouldn't give him a ranked opponent, but somewhere on the outside of the top 15. Up next, really the highlight of the night, Bobby Green, I'm not calling him King Green, faced off against Mauricio Ruffy, and the Fighting Nerds did it again. Green was 3-2 going in and finished in the first in both of those losses, and he did not buck that trend. Meanwhile, Ruffy was 3-0 going in. Green just had no answer for Ruffy's offense. The best he had was an oblique kick to the quad, but he abandoned it pretty quickly. He tried to shoulder roll a spinning heel kick and got caught right in the face and put out. He really had nothing. For that, he's down. I wouldn't cut him considering the performance. He's still a solid name that can be used to either build up a prospect, but his time as a viable figure in the rankings is pretty much done. Meanwhile, Ruffy, he's ready for the top 10 of the division. These Fighting Nerds are on a streak. And even besides the KO, everything he committed to landed, and it landed hard. The finish was probably coming a variety of different ways. Just the way he chose it was the best one. Up next, we got the lone female fight of the night. Amanda Lemos, the grizzled vet, taking on Yasmin Lucindo, who was a young upstart. This one was, if you needed a bathroom break, it was this fight. And honestly, it was largely Lucindo. She was 4-0 going in, number 7. This was her time to establish herself, and she fell short. For that, she goes into the down category and way down, should fall out of the top 10 down. She was way too passive. In almost 2 full rounds, she didn't land a single significant strike. Even when she was on the ground, which is where she wanted to be, she made no real attempts with submissions, which looks even worse given the Jalen Turner matchup that happened right afterwards. She barely tried to get up. She barely tried to move. She kept trying to initiate the clinch, but ended up on the bottom. And even when she was on top in the third, she attempted no ground and pound, no submissions, nothing. She just held on until she got reversed. Meanwhile, Lemos was fighting really for her career. She's 2-2 going in, though one of those was to Weili Zhang. It was more she didn't lose the fight because Lucinda was just handing it to her. She outworked an inexperienced opponent and just did enough to not lose. So for that, plus she's already number 5 in the division. Going any further would put her in line for a title shot, and this fight did not do that at all. It just reestablished her ranking. So for that, she's in the stay category. Up next, we had Jalen Turner versus Ignacio Bahamondes. Wow. Turner was 1-3 going in. Last finished by Manny Moicano. And he was a number 12 in the rankings. Just like the Moicano fight, he really found a way to snatch defeat from victory. He had several opportunities to disengage and get back to the feet where he was landing solid shots, but he chose to play on the guard too much and ended up getting caught in a pretty phenomenal triangle. Would have put him in the down category, but he retired after the fight. So and put him in the cut. Not because he deserves really to be cut from this. He deserved at least one more fight to fight for his job, but it sounds like he cut himself. And considering that, I don't want to criticize too much. He had an entertaining career, and at 29, I guess he just figured enough was enough. That brings us to Bahamondes. He was 2-1 going in on a 2-fight KO streak. He is definitely up. He was performing well on the feet, but basically took himself down to the ground, which initially seemed like a bad idea, especially considering the Lemos Lucindo fight that was right before it. But no, that guy did not stay. His combo from K guard back to the triangle was incredible. He needs to work on striking defense, especially against lanky opponents. Turner was able to land some pretty solid shots, but he's definitely ready. He should take Turner's place at least on the outside of the top 10, and his next fight should either be against another ranked opponent or somebody within the top 10. Up next, we had the favorite for fight of the night, and it did not disappoint. Rafael Fiziev took on Justin Gaethje in a rematch of their 2023 fight that I broke down. Gaethje was 2-2 going in and ranked number 3. Fiziev was 0-2 going in and ranked 11. For both these guys, they should be in the stay category. Fiziev came out with a phenomenal performance that I don't think anybody expected, especially in the first round, wrestling as much as he did. And Gaethje showed really improved wrestling defense, able to scramble up, as well as patience when he was on the ground. Fiziev had him locked in north-south and was landing solid elbows. Gaethje didn't just accept the position as he did against Khabib and with Charles. Despite how entertaining the fight was, neither guy really showed too much difference since their first fight. It really went the same way. Fiziev came out strong in the beginning, and Gaethje took over in the later stages. Gaethje didn't really show how much different a fight with Islam would go compared to his fight against Khabib. And he was already ranked number 3, so despite winning a solid back-and-forth fight, this shouldn't really put him in line for a title unless Islam chooses to vacate to chase 170 or 185. Meanwhile, Fiziev, he was number 11 going in, despite being on a 3-fight losing streak. Losing that kind of fight against a number 3 guy shouldn't really hurt him too much. He deserves another fight against a guy ranked around the outside of the top 15 to reestablish himself. Especially the hard shots he was landing would have put down a lot of those guys at the top 15 and outside. And last but not least, we had the fight everybody was waiting for. Alex Pereira took on Magomed Ankalaev. The real tale of this fight was not the most entertaining affair. It was more of a chess match. Ankalaev answered the question that he is a much better striker than anyone expected, but his wrestling is not the god tier that it was made out to be just by virtue of him being Dagestani. Having said that, his stock is definitely up. He's now the champion, so of course, there's not really any higher it can go. But his future really depends on Alex. And that brings us to the Alex Pereira. He answered the wrestling question pretty definitively. He stuffed 11 straight takedowns. He never touched the ground once, despite 12 takedown attempts by Ankalaev, allegedly the best grappler in the division. Between both of them, it was Pereira that landed the only takedown of the fight. Yeah, he got outstruck through most of it, and regardless of your scorecards, it was a close fight, but it wasn't a robbery. Pereira goes into the stay category because there really wasn't anywhere he could go. His stock might drop a little bit, but considering where he was at, if he wants, he definitely deserves a rematch, considering his resume. I mean, they give immediate rematches to fighters who just won the belt. With him having the most title defenses since John Jones, he definitely deserves it. Or if he wants to drop back down to 185, he could walk into a title fight there. Or if he wants to move up to heavyweight, that's why Ankalaev, really his next fight is going to be determined on what Pereira wants. Right now, it seems like he's saying he wants a rematch, but we'll see what happens. And that is the UFC 313 stock report. Up next, we're going back to the Apex with UFC Fight Night Vettori versus Delice 2. Tune in then for the stock report on that one. And keep a lookout for my upcoming breakdowns. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you all on the next one.